All right, 1 second. About to go live.
Truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Journey to Business Radio Show. Got your host here, Melissa Walker and Jeff Camino. I should have let you say that. Sorry. You can say your name.
Wow, you just stole my intro.
I stole this thunder in the intro. We are brought to you by Fishbowl Radio Network. So make sure you're either watching us on Facebook at Next Career Co., or you can also go to www.j2bradio.com. Today we have a very interesting topic. We've got a very wonderful guest on today, Greg Jenkins. In just a moment, he'll get to introduce himself. But I want to make sure real quickly before we go into Greg and everything that he's here for, wanted to make sure that you remember that this is a show where you can grow yourself, grow your career, or grow your business. So feel free to join our show anytime. You can do that by calling in to 214-431-5062. So make sure this show is built on reciprocity, and what that means is that we want you to join our show, and if you have any referrals for our guests or for, you want to give advice to anybody that's on the show, please feel free to write us at, again, j2bradio.com, or again, call in at 214-431-5062. So let's go into who we have on the show today and what our topic is today. So I have the pleasure of welcoming our guest, Greg Jenkins. And Greg, I'd like you to go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you, Melissa and Jeff. I really appreciate you having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Outstanding. So a little bit about me. I was in the United States Army for over 28 years, and during that time, I was a combat engineer. But after about the first 20 years, we were in the invasion of Iraq in 2003-04. And the last 8 years and change, I had an opportunity to shift my career from combat engineering to equal opportunity, culture, organizational development, diversity, and inclusion. And so I went in that direction for the last 8 years and change, and ended my career working at the Pentagon, where we were helping to stand up the Army's first ever diversity policy and training and management and those kinds of things. So that's the career side from the military. I'm originally born in Minnesota, raised in Michigan. I now have a small business, and I enjoy that immensely. And because I'm still at heart a soldier forever, I enjoy volunteering and mentoring service members in their transition, going from the military lifestyle to back to a civilian one. So that's it in a nutshell.
Well, that's obviously a pretty impressive resume. Actually, I think we should tell a story about how we met, Greg. Do you remember?
Oh, well, I'm not sure if I remember which one you're referring to, but I think it was in reference to helping out veterans.
Yeah, you found me on LinkedIn, and you were just doing a search, I think, and found me and reached out, and we started talking.
Absolutely, and I can tell you that networking that you just shared that you and I had done, I think that's a really good thing for people in business, people that are in transition, and yeah. So Melissa, you and I, we connected on LinkedIn and found out that we have some common interests and goals in terms of business and veterans and whatnot, and we've been connected ever since. So and here we are on the radio show now. So it's pretty wonderful.
Yeah, it was actually, I was so impressed with you because you literally just did a search, and I'm not sure what the search criteria was, but you found me, you reached out, and I was like, man, this is a go-getter. He's thinking about these kind of things and find somebody out there and just has the ability to reach out and make a new connection. And then we connected right away and had a common goal. And I mean, it was pretty amazing. I was very impressed by that.
Well, I think, if you know what your goals are in life, you know what I mean? In your life, in your career, and you have a good understanding of what it is you want to accomplish in life, I think you should go after those things. And that was, that continues to this day. Very, very much into network building, relationship building, and I mean, obviously, in the sense of professional relationships. And I think that's how we grow our businesses, we grow our life and careers in that sense. So, yeah, I'm a big proponent of that.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about your business and what you do, and really kind of what we're here to talk about today.
Sure. So my business is called Greg Jenkins Consulting, and I'm a diversity and inclusion consultant. And so what that means basically is this. A lot of the work that I do is working with organizations and teams that either aren't getting along very well together because of either gender or race or generations or some kind of difference is getting in the way of teams working together better. And so to simplify, what I do is able to work with organizations, assess where their challenges may occur, develop solutions to help them become better at what they do. So that's it in a nutshell.
Well, that's obviously very admirable. Jeff actually is a veteran here as well, so he's actually a Air Force veteran.
Yep, and
thank you for your service, Jeff.
yeah, well, you too. In 28 years, did I hear you say 28 years? So
Yeah.
So you thought you might want to stay a little bit, huh? So what are some of the highlights of that?
Well, some of the highlights. Yeah, that's a great question, and I tell you, when I went in, I did 3 years and got out, and I ETS'd. I mean, I got an honorable discharge, and I thought at that time it was right for me to try to go back into the civilian world. And one of the highlights was when I got out, and this is way back in the 80s. I became an expat. I was living in Germany. My wife is of German descent. She's an American citizen now, but I stayed in Germany. I learned the language. I had a job. I mean, I had completely gone native, I like to say, and that worked pretty well for about a year and a half. And then I thought, well, if I applied myself a little bit more and tried to make a career out of the military, I'd like to give it another shot, and that's why I went back in. So that's one big highlight I would think is the expat piece, and then a couple other things. I think in the 28 years I was in a leadership role for 25 of those, and so from sections and squads that I led, platoons. I was a first sergeant for a bunch of years. I was a drill sergeant for 3 years. That was an exhausting but very rewarding time of my life. And we were, as I mentioned earlier, we were in the invasion of Iraq in 2003, and then came back in 2004. And then the other thing that was really big, and I got to go back to why I do the diversity work now. And I had said that when I came back from Iraq, I got to change my direction of my career. But really, I kind of got grafted into it, if you will. I didn't want to do that work. And once I got into that school and started to learn about myself and others and how inclusion can be a huge leadership advantage, it really opened my eyes to wow, this is a topic I really am passionate about, and I want to do this the rest of my life. So that school, and the school I'm referring to, Jeff, is called the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute, and it absolutely changed my life, both personally and professionally. So those are some highlights.
When you talk about diversity and inclusion, I think there's a lot out there where companies are trying to implement that process and have diversity, and they think, okay, if we just hire a bunch of different people, we are diversity and we're inclusive, but they forget what the inclusive part means and how you actually make an organization inclusive. It's not just hiring people, it's how do you make them feel included and bring everybody together.
Oh, exactly, right. Yeah, you can hire anybody, but do you have the leadership skills to be able to bring people together to work towards a common goal, and then legitimately support and trust one another? And that falls on the shoulders of leaders. And I think one of the things that really kind of prepped me for the diversity and inclusion work was all those years in the military, because the military is, they're really good at a lot of things. And one of them is being able to take a bunch of diverse people from really all corners of the world, put them in a uniform, give them a mission, tell them what the values are, tell them how to accomplish the mission, give them the resources, and then they go execute. And the U.S. military does that very, very well. And so part of my military past or history, I bring that to my clients. I bring that to discussions and conferences and situations like this where we talk about how we can make organizations more inclusive. It's really about leadership.
Yeah, I mean, it does. You know, people say that it starts from the top, and it really does. In order to make any change in an organization, you have to have the leadership involved and help kind of drive that down through the organization. And, you know, it's really important to actually get the initiative. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, everything stems from the leader. You know, the leader sets the tone. The leader establishes the culture. The leader determines what the values of the organization or the team are going to be. The leader is going to decide what gets recognized and rewarded, and whatever gets recognized and rewarded is going to get reinforced. So it's everything's dependent on the leader.
To that point, I remember one time to an organization, and in that organization, they were actually doing conflict resolution, is what we were actually doing the training on. And it was funny because the CEO was in there with us as we were doing it, and we were giving him all the tools and everything to make it happen. And like, we know all this, but it's not working. And then at that point, the leader said something, and he literally threw somebody on his team underneath the bus right in the middle of that meeting. And me and the other trainer looked at each other and kind of like, I wonder why they're struggling with conflict resolution.
Right.
Yeah, that was maybe not the best tactic there. You know, I got to tell you, some of my my oldest lessons from the military were you praise in public and you punish in private. And it kind of sounds like somebody got punished in public. So that, you know, somebody got damaged because of that, and that probably didn't help the situation at all.
Yeah, that's right.
But you know, I'm surmising from a distance because I wasn't there. But
you touched on something interesting. So you mentioned that how the military does a really good job of, you know, taking a group of diverse people and putting them into, you know, similar situations and getting teamwork out of them. And I think one of the ways that they're able to leverage that is, you know, they use uniforms and they have, you know, certain haircut policies, et cetera, that kind of mold people into being similar to one another. So what are the challenges that you've seen when you're trying to implement something similar in the civilian world, but you don't have those particular policies or, you know, able to leverage that kind of tactic to do that?
You know, Jeff, that's a great question. And every organization is unique, right? So, right, in the military, we're going to be in uniforms, and maybe on the corporate side, that we don't have those same kinds of laws, rules, or regulations. You know, we don't a certain uniform or a certain grooming standard. But there are organizations that do have various regulations on, you know, the proper attire, and, you know, tattoos or no tattoos, or piercings or no piercings, or grooming standards. So they're there. But really, I think the best way I've discovered is this. You know, what you want to do is you want to create inclusive environments, and the best way to do that is by creating or helping to build inclusive leaders. If any organization out there is trying to develop a diversity and inclusion program, if the one thing that they can accomplish, just one thing, if it could just be the development of inclusive leaders, because if you get that right, that's going to take off on its own. And one of the ways to get folks together who may not have a uniform standard is to understand how people are motivated and behave. And what I mean by that is this. And it's 4 words that I like to learn, I like to use, and it was one of my best mentors taught me this. And it's the 4 words of welcome, respected, valued, and heard. And if an employee is having the experience of being welcomed in the organization, is valued at the organization, is treated with respect, and is heard, you know, you acknowledge that person, you know, you're going to have a pretty good organization. But here's the trick. When an employee or a team is not having the experience of being welcomed, respected, valued, or heard, they're going to do one of 3 things. And I don't care who they are, I don't care what country they're from, what language they speak. They're going to show up in one of 3 ways. And it's going to be these 3 things. They're going to get by, they're going to get out, or they're going to get even. And of course, none of those are leading to higher performance. So getting teams and organizations and leaders to understand about making sure that we're developing teams that welcome, respect, value, and hear our employees and our team members really does help.
I don't know if you can see it right now live on Facebook, but there's like little whenever people like something, you see the thumbs up all the way across the screen, and I keep seeing them fly across as you talk. So I think people are really
good
liking the message that you're sending.
Yeah, that definitely resonated.
So listen to this. I was in a meeting today in an organization, and while I was in the meeting, somebody mentioned, we're looking at some different things about changing up some things, and they're like, one of the things we have to consider is that you have to have a lactation room whenever you're doing your planning. And somebody kind of chimed in and they were like, well, if we're going to go that far, we might as well have a prayer room too. And so I was thinking about diversity and inclusion and thinking about different things today, and I was just like, wow, this specific place has a long way to go before they understand a little bit more about diversity and inclusion.
Right.
I mean, that's legal, but that's also thinking about it. So if you have somebody, whenever they say, well, might as well go that far and have a prayer room, I was like, so we don't consider that people want to pray or, or different things. And then the response was, we can just combine them both.
Well, I got to tell you, I mean, it's when an organization, wants to be in, say, well, we want to start a diversity and inclusion program, okay? And actually, I really don't kind of like the idea of a program. I would much rather say it this way: is that we're trying to weave in a thread of inclusion into the diverse fabric of our organization. Something where it becomes part of the DNA of the organization, not just a program, because programs have a problem of falling off of things down the road a ways. But going back to that, the various things that an organization wants to do to be inclusive, they've got to figure out what it is that they really think that means to them. What does it mean to be inclusive? What is that organization's definition of diversity? And I would think when I was first getting into this space that, diversity, I can look it up in Webster Dictionary and it'll be the same definition across everybody's organization, and that's not the case. In fact, when I was in the Pentagon, all the branches of the service, so Coast Guard, Air Force, Army, Navy, Marines, all of those organizations had diversity efforts going on, and every single one of us had a different definition for diversity, had a different definition for inclusion, had a different definition of how we were individually going to execute that mission. So I would circle back to say, what does the organization think they are trying to accomplish? What is it that they how do they see diversity and inclusion? How do they define it? How does that align with the goals and objectives and the values of the organization? Because I think if you figure that out first, then we're going to make sure that we've got a prayer room or whatever room, So, but we've got to really figure out what's our identity in that regard.
So you touched on something interesting. So you mentioned, even from the beginning, and I've heard it a couple times, how it really needs to come from the top down. Leadership really needs to embrace this. What do you do in situations where the leadership's maybe lackadaisical about that, or they're looking at the numbers, they're looking at bottom line stuff, and they're not really engaged in that? Is there a way for someone to work to get the leadership to get on board with these kind of ideas?
Jeff, yes, there is. The short answer is yes. but here's what I would say is, I don't know. And I want to use your word lackadaisical. I don't know if it's, and I'm not trying to counter that word, but
that's a big word.
I don't know if it's lackadaisical. I don't know if it's lackadaisical so much as it's what is impacting that leader, and what has the attention of that leader. And so when I encounter leaders that may be less inclined to be open to the topic of diversity and inclusion, I've got to think of a couple things. And one of them is this: what impacts me concerns me. And so what I do is I flip that around. And so I want to say to the leader, well, whatever impacts that leader concerns that leader. And if diversity and inclusion are impacting that leader, they're not going to be very concerned about that topic, period. And it's completely.
Hey, Greg, you're cutting out a little bit. You might want to move around a little bit.
Okay, is that better?
No.
Uh-oh. How about there?
Keep moving.
Okay. How about now?
A little bit better.
A little bit better?
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're good now.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it's valuable things to say. I want to make sure everybody hears it.
Yes. Okay. So one of my challenges, one of my tasks is when I'm talking to a leader who isn't interested in that topic, I've got to find out what impacts that leader. Because if I know what impacts the leader, I know what concerns the leader. And then once I understand what those impacts and concerns are, it is my job then to explain or portray the value of diversity and inclusion as it applies to that person's individual position, organization, bottom line, mission, what have you. And if I can't do that, then that's not on the leader. That's on me. So, and sometimes I've talked to leaders and they're just not interested at that particular moment, and that's okay. And there's a lot of times leaders, I get a chance to sit down with them and say, well, hey, there is a value to diversity and inclusion, and let me share a couple things that may help you in your bottom line, in your team, that kind of thing.
So when you mention that, so I know a lot of leaders, especially CEOs, at the higher level, they usually have an accounting or finance background. They're looking at the bottom line. They've got shareholders perhaps to keep happy, et cetera. What are do you have any statistics or any reference point where you can say, you know what, an organization that has diversity and embraces that is actually more productive, has a better chance of winning in the marketplace?
Before you answer that, Greg, I want to say actually one of the things that Tom, who's listening in, pointed out was that exact point, is that inclusive organizations are more productive. So I think that's a good benchmark and a good point, to bring up as well, is if you can find an organization like that is more productive and show that benchmark as an example. So good point for both of you.
Yeah, well, it is a good point that Tom is making too. I'm not going to give you specific stats because I just don't have them in front of me right now, and I don't want to misstate something and then have to backpedal. But let me tell you some things that I know for sure are.
And we know 89% of all statistics are made up anyway. So.
Well, okay, I won't argue, but here's where the value comes into the person who has no idea why this is valuable. So let's take a look at a couple things. So first of all, let's start with retention. So, if there is an issue within the organization that inclusion could help in terms of increasing its retention rates, there's some saved money, number one. Number two, are we trying to recruit a population of the areas in which our organization works and sells its goods and services? And are we as engaged in the various diverse groups where our organizations live and do business? Do we have people from varying backgrounds that work with us, that are part of our passive sales force, that consume our goods and services? Are we connected to those groups of people? So there's another argument there for that as well. It's the common problem that I see that if I'm a duck, I like other ducks, right? Because I feel comfortable around ducks, right? So, but if I can learn how to expand my comfort zones where I can start engaging with other groups, I can start selling and promoting my goods and services. I can start hiring more diverse people. Those diverse people can come in and help me, in terms of my marketing or sales, market share. There's a lot of ways that diversity and inclusion can be, a help to an organization, just from a numbers standpoint.
Yeah, those are good points. Yeah.
I have all these sound bites on here, and I was trying to find a duck one, but if I played it now, it would be a little bit late anyway.
Well, I like using that because, a lot of times when we're having a small group facilitation on the topic of diversity and inclusion, it can be a little bit frightening for some folks, because we're talking about race and gender and, sexism and power and discrimination, and there's a lot of heat around those kinds of topics. And so one of the ways that we want when we're engaging with a group of people is is developing right away the development of a safe space so that we can have some courageous conversations, because there's going to be a little discomfort sometimes, and that's okay. But if we can create a safe enough space, the conversations and the engagement gets better. And one of the ways, instead of saying, about identifying a particular diverse attribute of an individual, is I'll just say I'm a duck and I like other ducks. And it kind of lightens the discussion a little bit, so we can all get to the point without, having a hard time to get to the destination of talking about differences.
Yeah, I'm the duck out there trying to find, I guess not my mommy. That doesn't sound right. Never mind. This was a good idea in my head until it started coming out. So here's my sound effect that actually speaks to diversity and inclusion in an organization. I don't know what this sounds like, so let's see how it goes, okay?
Okay.
Well, it doesn't play at all. Scratch the sound bite. It's supposed to be a roller coaster, okay?
That's okay.
Leave it to Melissa to mess up the good approach. We're going with the professionalism, and here I come in trying to make a roller coaster, but that's okay. Okay, so, taking this topic, one of the things I would like to do is, so tell us a little bit about how this applies to the veteran and people that are, looking at, you mentor them, I think, in moving into careers and that kind of thing. Talk a little bit about that piece of what you do.
Sure. So I think, at least the way I view the world and my role in it, it's about inclusion anyway. So if somebody's asking me for help, or they're, for advice or mentorship or coaching, whatever the case may be, I want to be inclusive of that person. I want to find out, is there value I can provide? So with that context in mind, what I like to do first of all is get to meet the person, and so we share a little bit of information and whatnot about who we are and our backgrounds. So we start to build a little bit of a relationship. We start to build some safety into our relationship, and then I want to find out, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? And is it educational? Is it starting a business? Is it getting going to get a government job? Doing a 9-to-5 gig somewhere else? What are you trying to achieve? And once we know the goal, then we can start to backwards plan and start to make, a plan to achieve that goal. But one thing, I'll quickly finish with this. The one thing that is interesting, though, is a lot of people don't know what they want to do. And I don't mean that.
I still don't. That's a promise.
Yeah, they know they want to make money. They want to feed their families. They want a job. They want those kinds of things. They want a roof over their head. I don't mean that. But from a holistic, life-fulfilling aspect, they're not sure. And so a lot of it is just working kind of through that.
I want to save the world. Have you heard that a couple times?
Say that again, sorry?
I said I want to save the world. Have you ever heard that before?
I've never heard that one. but I have heard, where folks are just trying to, they want to become, here's the thing, when you're coming out of the military, whether it's 3 years or 33 years, it's an opportunity to become a whole new person. It's like a whole new life. And you are the architect of that life. And putting that together can be really exciting and rewarding.
Yeah, and that's exactly why, the company I have, Next Career, that's exactly what it is. It's your next career. It's your opportunity. And then we say life is limitless. Are you ready to own your journey? And that's exactly what it is, because when you take control, and coming out of the military, I think that really applies in multiple ways, but it's taking control of the journey and figuring out what you want to do, and having a mentor like you, Greg, that can help somebody take that path and figure out what they want to do and get there.
Yeah, so
I agree with you. Yeah, completely. Yep.
So I could foresee there's a lot of challenges for people coming out of the military trying to integrate back into civilian society and then into the workplace. So what are some of the biggest challenges, and how do you overcome those?
Oh man, I'll tell you, when you're in the military,
question.
That's a big one.
Yeah, it's a great question. So you're in the military. For those folks that haven't been in, your shelter's provided for, your lodging, your meals are provided for you, your health care, your pay, your benefits, everything is there for you. You're put in the position, and then you're supposed to operate and function and execute. And then when you come out of that framework, and now you go into a civilian, space, whatever. And you've got the civilian group of people who, if they've never had a military experience, don't really understand what you went through, and so now you have these two cultures, and they clash sometimes, or they fail to connect. And so I think one of the biggest challenges is the communication piece from the veteran side, to be able to communicate their value, their skills, their talents, what they can provide to the organization. That's a big one.
So I have so many things to comment on that too. I always kind of related it to, so a normal civilian, and this is the best thing I could think of to relate it to, because everybody, anybody that graduates high school goes through this. So, you're in high school and you have a culture, and you know everybody there, and you know where to go, and you know what you're supposed to do, and you have your family, and your toilet paper is provided. I mean, everything's there, your bills are paid, and then all of a sudden you move away to college, and you don't know anybody. You're in a bigger place or a different culture. You have to pay bills now. You have to be responsible and have your own schedule and make sure you're, getting to your classes, and nobody's telling you what to do, and all of a sudden you have all this a whole different world. And that's why I think people gain weight. That's why people, drop out, or different things, because it's just a culture shock. Now, granted, you take military and you've got 10 times more of that kind of pressure, based on what you experience while you're in the military. But it's the best way, I think, that in my mind I can relate to it, because I remember the shock that was for me when I moved away to college.
Yeah, that's a great point. That made me think of something too. So I remember one of the best things for when I was new in the military is I had what was called a sponsor. So when I got to my first duty station, there was somebody that just sort of showed you around, welcomed you in, let you meet other people. Wouldn't it be nice if the civilian world did the same thing? But you rarely do that. You get there day one, you meet the boss, you're hoping maybe you meet a few colleagues. Maybe they'll take you to lunch or something, and then they leave you.
Yeah, I mean, and to that point, it's like the military is really great about teaching you how to get in and prepare for that culture, but they kind of had to say it, but they neglect to help you get out of that culture and train you for what the other part of life is like. And so, that's one of the reasons that from the research that I've done with Next Career, one of the things that we did is we built a program that was built around that to help veterans learn the difference between the culture whenever you're in an organization and the military. So what's the differences? How do you prepare? How do you mentally get yourself there, and what resources are available if you're struggling in that area? But then the big gap, I think, out there is then training organizations. What does it mean to work with a veteran? And that's why we built both sides of that, is so you have that approach to where now the organization understands. And what we did is we actually took it to another level, because we actually train on all diversity and inclusion, because the thought process was, hey, if you're going to understand diversity and inclusion, or you're going to send the military, you have to understand all different areas of diversity and inclusion to truly be an inclusive environment. But we had a lot of focus on the military piece to make sure they do understand the life that these people are coming from and how to help integrate that into the environment. So what we call the culture of understanding. And I know, Greg, that's where we connected in that point, is that, this is similar to the work that you're doing out there as well.
Right. Yeah. And you just summed up, a really great way of moving forward. And I think both parties have responsibility.
Exactly.
I think, the employer has a responsibility. I mean, well, I would say they have a responsibility. More inclusive that employers, the better everybody can integrate in the organization, whether the veterans or not. And the veteran, who obviously wasn't a veteran, they were in the military. They
kind of cutting out again there, Greg.
Still doing it again?
Nope, now you're perfect. Go ahead.
Okay. And I think on the veteran side, it's incumbent upon the veteran to now learn a new culture, a new way of life, because they had to learn it to get into the military. So they could do it. And I would hasten to add this as well to all the listeners out there. It's not just veterans that transition. Everybody transitions.
Exactly. That's
so
100%
it's
true.
High school to college to marriage to having children to having kids leave home
to divorce.
Jobs. So, yeah, exactly, right. So everybody's going through transition. We just happen to be talking about veterans right now, but it can be a harrowing experience, and so mentors can help, and coaches can help, and organizations like yours, Melissa, can do a lot of really good things.
Yeah, so whenever you're in an organization and you're teaching some of these mentorship programs, I guess for a veteran out there, would you say to kind of seek these kind of programs, I guess is more so my question, and the benefit and value of them?
Oh, Melissa, absolutely. I encourage every single veteran that I've ever encountered that's contemplating or is in fact going to transition out of the military. Find a mentor. Find mentors, not just one. Take advantage of all the resources that are available from your particular service, because there is a lot of information and resources available.
There's no reason to reinvent the wheel, right?
Say that again, I'm sorry?
So there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of people that have been through experiences, so take the advice and learn from them.
Exactly. There are study after study after studies of the benefits of mentoring, not just for the mentee or the protege, but also for the mentor and the organization. So there's just so much value to those kinds of programs that I'm baffled that more organizations don't invest more in them, because they really do provide a return on investment.
And speaking of diversity, that's the funny thing. I was actually just in a session, or not a session, but a conversation today, and was talking to somebody about that, how I've talked to a lot of mentors. And the funny thing is that the mentors were saying that, honestly, they learned more than the mentees did, because speaking of diversity, you get that diversity of thought. And so a lot of times as a mentor, you challenge the mentee to come up with ideas and ways to resolve things. And 99% of the times, the mentors is learning just as much, if not more, than the mentees.
Yeah, because they have to be, a step ahead. So sometimes you ask questions that you need to have the answers to yourself.
Yeah, I try to tell everybody the best way to learn is to ask questions. So, as somebody who's interviewed, whenever I've had like a technology, for example, that I didn't understand, then I just call somebody and interview them, and I ask the questions, and they're really answering my questions. So I'm learning as I'm interviewing them, and it's just a great way to learn.
It is a great way to learn. That's my point about the value in a mentoring situation. So not only will the mentee learn, but so will the mentor, and then the overarching umbrella of the organization is going to benefit, because the mentor is also getting developed while serving as a mentor. So it's like a win-win-win. For organizations that have really robust and really supportive mentoring programs. And I'll tell you, there was a gentleman who shared this little anecdote with me, and I so love it. I want to share it here. And this guy, his name is Ray Ronaldo, and Ray said to me, he said, human beings are one of the very rare organizational assets that can appreciate in value. And I was like, man, that's perfect, because awesome. They are. You can take an individual and educate them and train them and stretch them and grow them and all those things, and they will get better.
I love that.
I love it. Or you can just let people come to work and do their daily grind and go home at the end of the day, and that's okay, I guess. But you can really enhance both the individual and the organization with inclusion and mentoring and coaching and those kinds of things.
So you both, and this is for both Melissa and you, Greg, so it sounds like you reach out to, any military service, and I'd imagine, people that maybe have been enlisted for just, say, a small, 3-year enlistment, 5-year enlistment or whatever, to those that are retiring out of the military. They've been there 20, 30 years. And then there's probably, all that in between. But where's the sweet spot in that? Is there a particular group that really benefits the most from this type of, exit strategy where they go and they get some consulting?
I mean, I don't know about you, Greg. My answer is no, there's not a sweet spot that anybody can benefit from mentoring and coaching, military, non-military, what have you. And I think that each of those different types, like if you have somebody who's been there for 10 years, you've had somebody that's been there for 28 years, or somebody's been there for 3 years, all have different types of challenges they face. So some of it's ego sometimes. So I did this in the military, therefore I should get this outside of the military, and then it's the realism approach that doesn't happen necessarily. Or it's, there's so many different things I think that come with that. But the answer, I think, ultimately is that everybody benefits no matter what. They're just different challenges they face.
I agree completely with you, Melissa. I agree 100%. The thing that I've noticed, though, Jeff, is, it kind of breaks my heart, but it seems to me that the people who need mentoring the most ask for it the least.
100%. And the people that need help in general, I think that's the case.
It probably is, because it seems to me like I've had dozens of mentees over the years through various veteran online mentoring programs that I work with and work for. And the folks that come and find me or reach out and ask me to be their mentor, they've got so many things going well. They're taking action. They're improving their education. They've got their finances in order. And, there's just a lot of things that they do good already. And I want to help them even more, and I do. But it seems like the folks that don't ask for the help are the ones that need it the most.
Yeah.
And that's, like I said, it's a little heartbreaking. And it's like, man, you got folks for whatever reason that they're not asking for help. And if they would just engage, just take an action and reach out to somebody, they might find that, it can change the way that their life, unfolds. So it's just my personal observation.
Yeah. And when you say with military, that's probably even more common, at least from my view of the world, is due to the training that you have and the expectation to do your job and do it well, that in the military you get even more or even less people, even fewer people, if I can speak, that ask for help.
I don't.
Well, especially for somebody who wasn't in the military.
I can't compare them to another group, right? But I think one of the other problems is this, though, or challenge from my own personal journey of transition, and then with my, using also my mentees and coalescing their experiences around this point, is that it's an identity issue. So what I mean by that is this. So I clearly knew my role and identity as an Army Sergeant Major, E9. And when I got out of the military, I didn't realize how strong that identity had me in its grip, if you will.
100%.
And so now that I'm in a suit and tie and I'm standing in front of a bunch of executives at some large company in a big city, I'm like, okay, who am I now?
And you don't have the same level of respect, or things that we used to. Yeah, because I think that we see that a lot of times with people that have been in the military for a long time that have a high rank. When they get out, they're like, wait a minute, yes, sir, you shouldn't respond to me that way. Do you know who I am? And guess what? They don't.
Right, yeah. The interesting thing about the military is immediately you can judge people's age, but a lot of times people are deceptive. But you see by the number of stripes or, the type of chevrons that they're wearing, where they fit in the pecking order, if you will. But in the civilian world, somebody could be wearing a suit and tie just the same as somebody else, but they may not be equals as far as the power that they have and influence that they have in the organization.
But in reality, the influence you have in an organization, you can be somebody who's an executive or CEO and then go to a swim tournament or not in a volleyball tournament. Nobody knows who you are either.
Yeah.
So,
that's true.
So I think that follows anybody. And the identity crisis, to your point, I think that is 100% the right words to use, for a specific military, but really any of us, when you go through a divorce or anything, you have an identity crisis, or your kids, you're empty nester and your kids go to college and you're like, wait a minute, but I'm mom or I'm dad, and all of a sudden you're not.
Right.
What do I do exactly?
Exactly.
And start calling your kids every day and writing them letters.
Yeah, well, that goes back to the communication thing on the veteran side. Jeff said a second ago, about, if Jeff and I were in the same room right now and we were wearing our dress uniforms, we are wearing a significant part of our resume on our clothing.
Exactly.
And so we don't have to tell each other who's got what rank and who's got what certificates or awards or certifications or any of that stuff. And so I think that from a military standpoint, it makes communication easier in the military, but then it didn't prepare you as a military member to be able to tell about what your value is, because I didn't have to ever tell that before. I just showed up and people knew a lot about me just by looking at my uniform.
I don't know. You told me you worked for the Pentagon, and actually from our conversations before, I know you also kind of helped create or defined, I'm not exactly sure, the diversity and inclusion programs and different things for part of the military, if I recall.
Yep, for the Army, right.
Yeah, and a couple of other different programs as well. You and our buddy Rick, so let's say hi to Rick real quick.
That's right, Rick Whitman, yes, he's out there listening. He was... he's a social psychologist that was working for a marketing company that helped us with our communication effort for Army diversity. and he did a great job of helping to tell our story.
Yeah, he also was a marketing of something else. I'm not even going to bring it up, but you know what I'm referring to, Greg.
Well, he did a lot of things for the military and other organizations. So yeah, he has done a lot of great work as a civilian working for the military.
Yeah, no, he's definitely been great. Sorry, something popped up on a screen that I've never seen before. I didn't know if I was supposed to do something about it or sorry. That got me off track a little bit. So, Greg, tell us a little bit more about, as somebody who came from the military and 28 years in, wow, that's impressive. Tell us a little bit about some of the challenges you faced being an entrepreneur and opening up your own business and how you've been able to overcome that. And I want to kind of bring that up because just last week we were talking about, opening your own business and internet marketing and how you market your organization. And I think that knowing the different resources and different things that are out there, is a good topic to talk about. But tell us how you kind of overcame those challenges.
Oh wow, yeah, that's a great topic. And yes, there were some very challenging things. I think that the thing that I underestimated was you can be good at anything, but when you are going to then take that thing that you're good at and then turn it into a business, that's a whole other thing to do. So you can be the best landscaper, artist, musician, whatever. But if you're going to try to then turn that into a business, the business itself becomes something that you've got to learn how to do. And that was a little more daunting than I thought. But I'll tell you the way I overcame it, and I highly recommend this for anybody that is considering going into business for the first time with no experience, is going back to that enter piece and also seeing if you can't find an organization that wants to take you under their wing and teach you how to run a business. And I really need to highlight two organizations right now and two people that had they not done what they did for me, we wouldn't be on this call, on this show right now. And the first one is Dr. Kizzy Dominguez. And I started consulting for her a few years back before I started my business. And her business is K-Parks Consulting Incorporated, and I learned a lot from her. And the other person is a guy by the name of Mr. Scott Hogan. And Scott is the CEO and founder of an organization called Inquest Consulting. And Inquest Consulting is a diversity consultant. And I learned tremendous amounts of information and gained deep levels of experience by working for and with both of those people in those organizations. And that was the greatest thing that helped me out, was having somebody there to show me the ropes, to allow me to make mistakes, to coach and teach me as I was building my business.
Well, I've got one of my mentors actually online right now, Tom Allen. He actually has helped me a lot with running business. So I want to say thank you to Tom while we're thanking people, since he's on here listening. But also that goes back to the whole point we're talking about, that mentorship. So even just looking at either a career or if you're going into business for yourself, finding mentors, finding people to help you is really the best approach, because I agree, opening up your own business, you think you know something and how to do it, so you're going to do a great job whenever you open up your own business, and then you find out what opening a business means and how many different things you have to learn and know and how many people you need to surround yourself with to be successful, and it's ridiculous. But yeah, it makes a huge difference. So you're involved in quite a few organizations. Tell us a little bit about some of the boards you sit on and some of those organizations. And also, before, we've only got a couple more minutes left, so tell us a little bit about how to reach you and what people would reach out to you for, and as far as mentorship or help that you offer.
Sure. So I'll mention some organizations that I have associations with, that I work with, and then I'll finish that with how to get in contact with me. So there are a number of them, and in no particular order. One of them is working with the United Nations. There's the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations, which surprise, has a mentoring program for folks that if you meet their criteria, you can serve as a mentor to people from all over the world, and that is a fantastic organization with great people that are working really hard to help things on a planetary level, literally. Another organization that I'd like to highlight is Racing Toward Diversity. That is a publication. It's a magazine, online and hard copy print, and I am the Veteran Advisory Board member for that organization. And I really want to highlight, it's the founder, publisher, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Fields Jackson. And Fields Jackson is the person that convinced me to get into social media and use social media as a way to promote my business and also to develop my persona in the world of business as a mentor and coach and diversity and inclusion professional, and as somebody who wants to volunteer and help out other organizations. So Racing Toward Diversity magazine is an important part of my life. And then we were talking mentoring and veterans, and specifically an organization I want to mention is the eMentor program. eMentorprogram.org is an organization that is owned and operated by an organization called Academy Women. And Academy Women was founded by a group of Service Academy female graduates that had no mentors when they first allowed women to go into West Point and the Naval Academy and Air Force Academy. And those ladies knew well that if they were able to help other women out through mentoring and other methods, that they could do a lot of good. And they have done a tremendous amount of good. And so I've worked with them. I'm still a mentor for them, and I'm very honored to be so. And there's this, the Mission Continues is another veteran organization that's out there. Yellow Ribbon Fund is another veteran organization. And I apologize if I'm missing any. I know there's a bunch more. But I'll finish up and say this. If anybody that would like to connect, I'm more than happy to make introductions or share resources or just get on the phone and talk. My website is www.gregjenkinsconsulting.com. It's easy to find. We just installed a new chatbot. We're really proud of it. so you can engage with the chatbot, or you can email or call us directly.
Say that one more time if you don't mind. We're going to type it into the chat on Facebook.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Is it
and I'm on LinkedIn as well. So you can find me at my URL on LinkedIn as well. So I like to connect on LinkedIn. Twitter, I'm at Greg B. Jenkins. That's my Twitter handle, and I would love to connect with folks that would like to expand their professional networks and relationships.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. You've been a wealth of information. And, it's so funny. Sometimes we have people, and you weren't one of them, but we have people that get so nervous about coming on here, and you realize that an hour is no time at all. It flies by.
Oh, it goes fast. Yes.
So thank you so much for coming on the show. And I think if people are looking for a mentor or guidance, either coming out of the military or not, I think that you'd be a great resource.
Sure.
That you've been a good mentor and friend of mine since you found me on LinkedIn. And we appreciate your service and your help today.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. A lot of good information.
So,
Melissa, Jeff, thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it, and I hope we provided some value to your listeners today.
Yeah, we made it through another show without a commercial break. Too much good content here. So I'm going to remind everybody that
wonderful.
You're on Fishbowl Radio Network with the Journey to Business show. Your host, Melissa Walker, and you can say at this time,
Jeff Camino.
Feel free to send us messages at www.j2bradio.com. And remember, life is limitless. Are you ready to own your journey? So we are still live on Facebook, but we have taken off the radio. So this is the point where we're going to tell everybody goodbye on Facebook. And Greg, I will call you in a little bit. So, Jeff, come on in.
Hey, y'all. Thanks.
Bye, Facebook.
Bye,
Thank you,
Facebook.
everybody, for listening. All right, we're ending.